The second pink line bloomed on the test stick, stark and undeniable against the white plastic. A wave of nausea, sharp and acidic, churned in Chloe Beaumont's stomach. IT had nothing to do with morning sickness and everything to do with pure, cold terror. Her heart didn't just sink, it plummeted, a dead weight dragging her down into an icy abyss. Her fingers trembled as she snatched the stick. She wrapped it in layers of toilet paper, a frantic, clumsy motion, then shoved it deep into the bathroom's chrome wastebasket, burying it beneath a handful of discarded cotton pads, hiding a bomb. The bile rose in her throat again. She lunged for the toilet, her body convulsing in a series of dry, racking heaves that produced nothing but a bitter taste on her tongue. The sleek, built-in intercom chimed, a sound as sterile as the rest of the penthouse. Graham Hayes' voice, clipped and devoid of warmth, cut through the air. "Chloe, Mr. Sinclair will see you in 10 minutes. Her breath hitched point 10 minutes. She scrambled to her feet, her legs unsteady, and turned on the cold water, splashing her face again and again. The shock of the cold was a welcome distraction from the firestorm in her gut. She stared at her reflection in the vast, mirror-paneled wall. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a panic she couldn't quite mask. She tried to smile, a practiced, placid expression she'd perfected over 3 years. The corners of her mouth twitched. Refusing to obey, IT was a ghastly, terrified grimace. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she walked out of the ensuite bathroom. The bedroom was a cavern of minimalist luxury charcoal silks, polished chrome, and glass. It felt as personal as a high-end hotel suite. Julian was already in the living area, seated on a low-slung Italian sofa that cost more than a car. He was impeccably dressed in a dark, tailored suit, his focus entirely on the financial paper in his hands. The air around him was a force field of untouchable authority. He didn't look up as she approached. He gestured with his chin toward the marble coffee table. "Sign it." On the table lay a document, its pages crisp and white, a renewal of their agreement. She picked it up, her fingertips instantly cold, the heavy paper feeling slick and foreign. The new terms were harsher, the list of her obligations more explicit, more demeaning. Another wave of nausea crusted. She instinctively pressed a hand to her mouth, a small, choked gasp escaping her lips. Finally, Julian's head lifted. His eyes, the color of a frozen lake, narrowed with impatience and scrutiny. "What is it?" "Nothing," she lied, her voice thin. "I think I caught a chill last night." His gaze flickered down, a brief, dismissive sweep over her flat stomach before returning to her face. A cold, humorless smile touched his lips. "I thought you managed your cycle with more precision than that." He'd interpreted her nausea as premenstrual discomfort. The casual, clinical ownership in his tone sent a genuine chill through her, far colder than any she'd feigned. The assumption that he knew every rhythm and flaw of her body was part of the contract, an unspoken clause. Arguing was pointless. It was always pointless. She picked up the heavy, gold-plated pen from the table. Her hand was so unsteady she had to grip it with both, just to guide the nib to the signature line, Chloe Beaumont. The name looked like a stranger's. He watched her, his expression unreadable, until the pen was back in its holder. He folded the newspaper with a decisive snap and rose to his feet. He was a tall man, and his height always felt like a form of pressure, a physical manifestation of his power. He took the signed contract from her nerveless fingers, placing it neatly in his briefcase. Then he loosened his tie, a small, habitual gesture that meant the business of the day was concluded, and another kind of business was about to begin. He stepped toward her, closing the small gap she had tried to maintain. His shadow fell over her. He cupped her chin, his grip firm, tilting her face up to his. His kiss was exactly like the contract. Cold, precise, and transactional. There was no warmth, no tenderness. It was the fulfillment of a clause, a seal on their renewed bargain. Chloe stood rigid, enduring it. The churning in her stomach intensified, a violent storm of acid and fear. She bit down hard on the inside of her lip, the sharp pain a focal point to keep herself from gagging in his arms. He must have sensed her stiffness. He pulled back, his brow furrowed with a flicker of annoyance. "Your performance is becoming lackluster, Chloe," he commented, his voice a low murmur that was more cutting than any shout. He released her and turned toward the massive walk-in closet. "There's a gala tonight. Paige will have a gown sent over." She watched his back, the perfect cut of his suit, the confident stride. She felt like a machine receiving its programming for the day, an exquisitely dressed automaton. When he was gone, she drifted toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. The panoramic view of New York City sprawled below a glittering, vibrant world she could see but never touch. She was trapped in the highest, most beautiful cage in the city. Her hand, of its own accord, came to rest gently on her lower abdomen. A secret, a heartbeat that had no place in their contract, no clause to define its existence. Her phone buzzed in the pocket of her silk robe. She pulled it out. IT was an automated email from her mother's long-term care facility, a payment reminder. The number on the invoice was staggering, a relentless monthly demand that tethered her to this life. A wave of pure despair washed over her, so potent it made her knees weak. She couldn't leave him. Not yet. She was caught in a web woven from his money and her mother's needs. She turned, her movement stiff, and walked back into the pristine white marble bathroom. She retrieved the bundled-up pregnancy test from the wastebasket. This time, there would be no trace. She broke the plastic stick in half, flushing the pieces down the toilet, watching until the last sliver of pink and white vanished into the vortex. Destroying the evidence. She looked at herself in the mirror again. The panic in her eyes was still there, but beneath it, something else was hardening. A glint of steel. She was trapped, but she would find a way out. She had to. The back of the Bentley was silent, a vacuum-sealed bubble of tension gliding through the chaotic Manhattan traffic. Chloe stared out the window, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and red. A bridal shop, its window displaying a mannequin in a cloud of white tulle, flashed past. The sight was a sharp, physical pang in her chest. She had to know, even if the answer destroyed her. She had to hear it from his lips. "Julian," she began, her voice barely a whisper, yet it sounded like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. "Have you ever thought about the future?" His gaze lifted slowly from the glowing screen of his laptop. His eyes were flat, devoid of emotion. "My future is mapped out in a 5-year strategic plan. You are well aware of your position within it." His words were precise, corporate. She wasn't part of his life. She was a line item in his plan, a recurring expense. She forced herself to push further, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I don't mean the business plan. I mean a home. Marriage. Maybe children." She let the last word hang in the air, a fragile, terrifying thing. She watched his face, searching for any flicker of warmth, any hint of possibility. She found none. His expression didn't just harden, it froze. The temperature in the car seemed to drop 10 degrees. He closed his laptop with a soft, definitive click that echoed with finality. It was a warning. A dry, humorless chuckle escaped his lips. It was a sound more chilling than a yell. "Chloe, don't forget what you are. What are you fantasizing about?" The question was a blade, and it slid between her ribs with surgical precision. Still, she pressed on, fueled by a desperate, maternal instinct she hadn't known she possessed. What if, just what if, there was an accident? He turned his head fully toward her then, and the utter lack of humanity in his ice-blue eyes made her blood run cold. "There are no accidents," he said, his voice low and deadly calm. "Only failures in planning. Our agreement has clauses for such contingencies. Any accident would be terminated." He used the word terminated with the same detached finality he would use for a failed business venture. It applied not just to their contract, but to the life inside her. The blood drained from her face. The world tilted, the glittering lights outside spinning into a dizzying vortex. She felt faint. He saw her pallor and misinterpreted it, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. He thought she was heartbroken over her shattered fantasy of becoming Mrs. Sinclair. "Don't entertain ideas above your station," he warned, his voice soft but laced with steel. "You're compensated more than adequately for your role." The car purred to a stop in front of the Waldorf Astoria. A uniformed doorman opened Julian's door. He stepped out, adjusting his cufflinks, instantly transforming back into the untouchable titan of industry, Julian Sinclair. He glanced back at her, his face an impassive mask. "Get out, take my arm, and smile." It was an order. Chloe took a breath, a ragged, painful thing. She swallowed the bitterness and the nausea that clawed at her throat. She was a machine, and she would execute her programming. She slid out of the car, her designer gown shimmering under the hotel's bright lights. She placed her hand on his forearm, the fabric of his suit feeling like sandpaper against her skin. She forced her lips into a perfect, camera-ready smile. The flashbulbs erupted, a blinding storm of light. She felt like a puppet, her strings pulled by the cold, powerful man beside her. Inside the grand ballroom, the air hummed with the conversations of the city's elite. Julian was in his element, moving through the crowd with an easy, predatory grace, a glass of champagne in his hand. He laughed at a joke from a banking CEO, the sound utterly convincing. The man from the car was gone, replaced by this charming, formidable stranger. Chloe murmured an excuse and slipped away, heading for the ladies' lounge. She found an empty stall, locked the door, and leaned her forehead against the cool marble partition. She pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle the sobs that tore through her. No tears fell. The pain was too deep for that. It was a hollow, aching void where a tiny, fragile hope had just been brutally extinguished. He would terminate their child. He considered their baby a contingency to be managed. She stayed there until the shaking subsided. Then she methodically repaired her makeup, erasing any trace of her breakdown. Her reflection was a perfect strangerette, beautiful woman in a couture gown, her eyes empty. Returning to the ballroom, she bypassed Julian and his circle and went straight to the bar. "Soda water with a twist of lime, please." She watched the bartender prepare her drink, the tiny bubbles rising in the crystal glass. They looked like tiny, fleeting sparks of life. In that moment, a decision formed in her mind, solidifying from the wreckage of her heart. She had to leave. Not just for herself, but for the secret life she carried. She would run, disappear, and she would do it alone. She turned from the bar, scanning the crowd, her mind already racing with impossible plans, her gaze inadvertently locked with a pair of dark, interested eyes from across the room. A man she didn't know was watching her, a speculative, almost predatory, smile on his face. And she knew, with a sinking certainty, that nothing about leaving Julian Sinclair would be simple. The man with the interested eyes made his way toward her, navigating the crowded ballroom with an easy confidence. He was handsome, with dark hair and a suit that was just as expensive as Julian's, but worn with a more relaxed air. Vincent Dubois, he said, his voice a smooth baritone. He offered a hand. You must be Chloe Beaumont. I've seen your picture with our host. Chloe shook his hand briefly. Mr. Dubois. Please call me Vincent, he insisted, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Mr. Sinclair is a lucky man to have such a beautiful companion by his side. The word companion landed like a carefully aimed dart. It was polite, socially acceptable, and utterly demeaning. Chloe forced a tight smile, murmuring a non-committal response. Just then, Julian appeared, a stunning brunette in a red dress on his arm. He introduced her as the daughter of a shipping magnate. His eyes, however, were fixed on Vincent, and they had gone from coolly sociable to dangerously cold. The air crackled with unspoken rivalry. He saw them talking, and a possessive, territorial glint flashed in his gaze. He turned to Chloe, his voice cutting through her polite conversation with Vincent. Get me a glass of champagne. It wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered with the casual authority of a man dismissing a servant. In front of his rival, he was marking his territory, reminding everyone of her place. Humiliation burned in her cheeks. She bit her lip hard and turned without a word, walking toward the nearest waiter with a tray of drinks. Still the same brute, Julian, she heard Vincent say behind her, his tone laced with amusement. A few feet away, Judah Perez, Julian's younger half-brother, watched the exchange. He shook his head with a sigh of weary resignation and looked down at his phone, his thumb scrolling through the screen. The Sinclair Group's internal Slack channel was on fire. An anonymous user had just posted in the random channel. The message was simple. Someone left this in the 32nd floor ladies' room trash. Attached was a photo, a grainy, poorly lit picture of a used pregnancy test. 2 pink lines were clearly, horrifyingly visible. The channel exploded. OMG, who is it? Spill the tea. Probably someone in marketing. They're all a mess. Judah's brow furrowed. He remembered Chloe looking pale and unwell when she'd rushed out of the 32nd floor restroom this morning. He thought it was just stress. Now, a different, more alarming possibility took root. He looked up, his gaze finding Chloe as she returned with Julian's drink. His expression was a mixture of concern and dawning comprehension. Chloe handed the champagne flute to Julian, her movement stiff, her eyes fixed on a point over his shoulder. Vincent stepped forward again, smoothly inserting himself back into the conversation. He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket and offered it to Chloe. If you ever decide you're in the market for a new environment, he said, his voice low and suggestive, give me a call. My company values its people. Chloe hesitated. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the card. It was a lifeline, a small act of rebellion. She took it, her fingers brushing against his. That was the final spark. Julian snatched the card from her hand before she could even look at it. He ripped it in half, the sound sharp and violent, and let the pieces flutter to the floor. My things, Julian snarled at Vincent, his voice a low, menacing growl, are not for you to touch. Vincent didn't flinch. He simply shrugged, a knowing smile playing on his lips. So, I was right. You do care. Judah quickly stepped in, placing a hand on Julian's arm. Jules, not here, he murmured, trying to de-escalate. Did you see the Slack channel? There's some major gossip going around. He was deliberately vague, testing the waters. Julian brushed him off, his glare still locked on Vincent. I don't care about office gossip. Chloe used the distraction to escape. She slipped away to a deserted stone terrace overlooking the city, the cool night air relief on her burning skin. She needed to breathe. She pulled out her phone. A notification from Slack glowed on the screen. Her thumb swiped it open. And her world stopped. The picture, the grainy photo, the 2 pink lines at IT was hers, not the one she had destroyed at the penthouse, but the first one, the one she'd taken in a frantic blur in the office stalls that morning. The cleaning crew must have missed it, or someone had deliberately fished it out from the bottom of the bin. Panic, cold and absolute, seized her. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. She swayed, gripping the stone balustrade for support. Are you all right? She jumped, spinning around. Judah was standing there, holding a glass of water. His face was etched with concern. Chloe shoved her phone back into her clutch, her movements jerky. I'm fine. He didn't look convinced. He watched her pale, stricken face, his eyes full of a pity that was almost as humiliating as Julian's cruelty. Then he looked past her, toward the ballroom doors where Vincent was now standing, watching them. Judah raised his voice, loud enough for Vincent to hear. Go for it, man. My brother's an asshole. She deserves better. It was a performance, a deliberate act of provocation, and Chloe was trapped in the middle of it.